This talk is very, very, very important. The detours that astronomers have gone through over the past 100 years have been quite damaging to the study of astrophysical philosophies and geophysical philosophies and things like that. But something I've learned that was probably the most damaging thing ever was the fact that our philosophy, our understanding of the stars, did not go hand in hand with our technology. Our technology became much more advanced than our willingness to understand what stars were doing. So our stars, philosophy of stars was down here somewhere, and our technology was like up into the stratosphere, but our understanding was like down there. So there was this dichotomy that sprouted up during the nuclear age. And I believe I pinpointed the problem. So here we go. It is apparent that assumptions, yes, they were assumptions, were falsely applied to the stars and their evolutionary paths. A simplified step-by-step realization is outlined concerning the downfall of common sense in astrophysical sciences. First, they assumed that the sun is the same age as Earth. This is one of the major assumptions that astronomers take to be true when there's no evidence for it at all. Actually, there is evidence to the contrary that Earth's oceans are actually much older than the solar wind. That was from the Stardust satellite that went up and captured a whole bunch of material, and it had crashed back down to Earth. It didn't enter Earth's atmosphere, but they did capture some data from that, and they found out that the solar wind is much, much younger than Earth's oceans. So this was kept back in the day, but this is now obsolete. But we're still working on back in the day here. So after this, after they assumed that the sun is the same age as Earth, they then discovered that the Earth is really old. They said, well, the sun and the Earth formed at the same time in a proto-disk. Now, keep in mind, remember the proto-disk is the old-style theory of thinking that nebula were new solar systems. Back in the day, they used to believe the Andromeda galaxy was a new solar system in formation. But then Hubble zoomed in on it and realized that it was an entire galaxy, and then there were many galaxies full of hundreds of billions of stars. So, but the proto-disk theory just still stayed alive for some strange reason. They never came to terms with the fact that they were actually looking at galaxies. But anyways, they had the sun same age as Earth, and Earth was discovered to be really old. So they're like, oh my God, that means the sun is really old. And that also means the sun needs a mechanism to be really old, because it wasn't a big fire, okay? It couldn't have been from gravitational collapse alone, because the fire theory, the big burning coal fire theory, would only make about a 6,000-year-old sun. The gravitational collapse understanding would only have about a couple tens of millions of years. But the sun needed to be billions of years old. It needed to be 4.5 billion plus years old. So like, oh no, we got a problem. But the thing is that they didn't have any mechanism that existed to allow for the sun to be as old as the Earth. Okay, they ran into a wall of theory. They're like, oh no, what's powering the sun? And then at the same time, what happened is they discovered radioactivity and nuclear matter. And it was discovered as being very useful, energetic, operating on vast timescales with radioactive half-lives and things like that. As well as, it's still mysterious. And then they took this reasoning and they were like, oh wow, that means we do have a mechanism. Look, it's what powers stars. And they assumed this to be true before they even had any discovery of any internal regions of the sun. And nothing actually showed that the sun was a fusion reactor or nuclear powered. But they assumed it to be true based off of previous assumptions, based off of previous unmitigated assumptions. It's a giant steaming pile of shit of assumptions. But anyways, they discovered radioactivity and they discovered nuclear matter, so they immediately applied it to stars. And they said, well, that's it. The sun is powered nuclearly, and that's why it's the same age as Earth. So then they said, well, the sun has to be powered in nuclear fashion only so they can have a similar age to Earth, and there you go. They were stuck with a fusion model of stars. But this is actually very, very incorrect, and obviously is built off of a giant steaming pile of shit. Here's what should have happened instead of going on a huge detour. I think the detour is going to be lasting for about 100 years. Maybe the next 20 or 30 years we'll snap out of it, and that's one of my goals, is to help people out with that. The sun clearly is much hotter and younger than the Earth. Just looking at it, you can tell. Look at the Grand Canyon and then look at the Earth. Look at the sun. Doesn't that look older than the sun? It appears older. Then maybe we should have went with that assumption. It would have been a lot safer. As well, is proven to be younger, as the solar wind is younger in composition than the Earth's oceans. But that's kind of buried in the mainstream articles. They don't want people to realize that. It's not good for careers. Thermochemistry, which is the heat from chemical reactions, and electrochemistry is the electricity and related to chemical reactions and chemical reactions causing electrical currents, are discovered as very useful, energetic, and operate inside of different states of matter, including plasma and gas, including ionized matter, involving electrical and magnetomechanic interactions. What I mean by magnetomechanic is you have a magnetic field pushing things. That's basically it. So it's also what's called a MHD, or magnetohydrodynamics, or if you want to do the really long word, which is even more correct, it's electromagnetohydrodynamics. And everybody knows that young stars like the sun are complex electromagnetohydrodynamic systems. But this was never included in all this other bullshit. So here we are starting from scratch again. Of course, starting from scratch is in the interest of academics. They want to build models based off of false information and be safe in their career. So they have nothing to convince them to make a change. So we have to change things on our own. And I believe my listeners have the intelligence to do so. And yes, I believe in you guys. The processes that power stars are therefore understood in a light that does not require the invention of particles, we're talking about neutrinos here, to plug holes in math equations outlining theories which are based on false assumptions. So we have a multi-layered cake of shit that we have to slice through, and maybe even throw the baby out with the bathwater on this one, because what we're dealing with here is a huge steaming pile of shit. And that's why I'm reading this book right here, Robert Oppenheimer, A Life Inside the Center. This had to do with the development of nuclear warheads. This guy is very important to understand. He was mainly influential on the aspect of making, stars and mathematical kind of thing. And I'm still on page 44. I just kind of took a break on it, but I'm pretty sure it's gonna go into fissioning. See the word fission right there? I'm gonna start reading about that sooner or later. But this is where I'm gonna really get to the meat and potatoes of how big of a detour the nuclear age has put astrophysical philosophy. Now, I know some people might have a problem with this understanding, but let me go ahead and draw a simple diagram for you of an object where fusion reactions are actually happening. Look this up online. It's a Hercules A. Now, what you'll see is you have this giant bipolar outflow coming from the center region of a large birthing galaxy, if you will. Hercules A. There's jets of matter coming out from the central regions of that object. This is where fusion reactions are taking place, inside of birthing galaxies. But unfortunately, during the time of Oppenheimer and the nuclear age, where our technology was really, really advanced, and we started to understand how powerful nuclear reactions were, we didn't quite understand that this is where they were actually taking place, inside of birthing galaxies. Because radio astronomy hadn't come to fruition yet. Radio astronomy allows these objects to be seen. Instead of optical astronomy, to look at something such as an elliptical galaxy or a radio source, you would just see a big diffuse ball, nothing interesting. But now that we have radio telescopes trained on these objects, we can see that there's much more activity going on in there, and these objects are incredibly violent. This is where fusion reactions are taking place inside of birthing galaxies. They're also called radio galaxies, or quasars, which are, I believe, to be younger galaxies. And then you have also pulsars, which I'm not too sure about it, but I think pulsars are embryonic galaxies. Think of an oak tree. Okay, you have a giant tree, and then you have the roots down here, and you have the two directions that it goes in, but in the center regions there was a acorn, O-R-N, and that grew up into a large galaxy, or a tree, I should say, that has two bipolar flows. You have one going this way, one going this way, equal and opposite reactions. Same thing with a galaxy. You have equal and opposite reactions to keep the galaxy stable. But over time, obviously, it will start, rotating and stuff like that, and turn into this giant, one of these numbers. But anyways, there you go. Hopefully, people can make the most of this. Realize that the nuclear age, they did not have the tools required to appropriately place their technological understanding inside of terms of astrophysical philosophy. They just didn't have it there yet, but they went ahead and claimed it to be true without any further observations. All right, there you go.